Well, hey guys, it is so great to be back with you. It's Wednesday, it's after work time, and it is hump day. That means it's happy hour for the DINKs. And welcome to Dentists in the Know. This is your backstage pass, and it is for current trends, politics, and education all throughout the dental world. It is live, and it is over a cocktail, my friends. It is so good to be.
Cheers.
Yeah, cheers to that. It's great to be sipping a cocktail with you guys. I'm Dr. Jeff Horowitz. The guy up there is Dr. Chad Duplantis. The gal over there is Dr. Jennifer Bell, better known as JB. All of us are practicing dentists. We are all educators. We are all business owners. And you know what our job is, JB?
What?
It's to bring all of them in the know. Well, let's get into what we have going for everyone out there tonight, which is an incredible show. We have a guy with a lot of letters behind his name, and he's going to be talking to us about embezzlement. And have either of you guys ever been stolen from in practice?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Not, I think for a lot of dentists, it's that situation that just that they're not aware of. I mean, I have been. I had a
Yeah.
really bad ending to a partnership that was a lot to do with dishonesty in the practice. So this is certainly a topic that is very close to my heart. But for all of you guys, you have got to listen to this tonight. David Harris from Prosperident. He's a CPA, CMA, MBA, CFE, CFF, and tonight, you know what else he is? He's a DINK. That's right. We just added that to those letters behind us.
I better see that on his LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, that's going to be on the LinkedIn profile. But before we get to David, and that's going to be a great interview, so stick around for that. Before we get to that, let's talk. What is that? What do you have there?
All his letters.
Oh, all his letters.
Yeah.
Before we get to David, JB, I know you got some great news for us because you're doing
you
a
ready?
lot of AGD stuff right now. You're like right in the thick of it right now.
Dude, there's so much going on. Here's something interesting that you may want to hear about. The FDA has just formed a review group where they have, when OSHA, CDC, FDA, when they're thinking about changing rules or they'll have an open mic night, basically, where it's an open session for comment. And they all have to have it. It's part of the law when they want to bring on new regulatory issues. They have to have an open comment period for all legislation or all large organized groups to jump in, lobbyists, manufacturers, companies, et cetera, to have some comment. And the thing that just came up is that the FDA is now looking into federalizing opioid education for prescribers. So I'm sure you're all familiar. Within the last 5 years, really at the 5-year mark, there was a lot of push for states to onboard opioid management systems. So, for instance, I can speak for North Carolina because that's the one I'm most familiar with, but electronic prescription became a big push. Mandatory in North Carolina, mandatory annual education. We had to do database searches, and that there was a whole program that we had to comply with if we wanted to continue to have class 2 narcotic prescription capability. The FDA is now looking at federalizing that so that they would have a standardized education program. Now, this might seem fairly innocuous to some, but if you were to look at all 50 states, there's a really big discrepancy between different states and what they require of their practitioners. So for some, the federal mandates of opioid prescription management might be less than what the state has instituted, and for others it might be significantly more. So anyway, there's an open comment period. If you're super passionate or feel inclined to do so, you should either reach out to the organized dental groups that you're a participant in or find a way to get your opinion heard otherwise through your legislatures, etc., because the FDA is looking at that as a federal program as opposed to a state managed program. Questions, comments?
Our state is the same way. It's a pain in the butt, and I'll tell you, it's so hard to write those prescriptions. It certainly has to have decreased the practitioner
Yeah.
ease of doing so.
Isn't that
And
the truth?
a lot of people are like,
the
yeah,
current statistics show 60% decrease in opioid prescription over the last 5 years. So it was 200 and we'll just say 250 some odd million prescriptions that were being written back in 2015, 2016. We're down to the 140, 130 range. So all of those things, plus even if those programs were in place, just general awareness and conscientious prescribing practices was very important. But let us not forget, it was the last Surgeon General who was in place within the last 4 years that said that the opioid crisis was on the backs of dentists. So we definitely have a bit of a mark, whether it is actually factually, statistically, and data true or not. There is a lot of pressure within the oral medicine, oral dental care realm.
For the 12 or 20 that we would write, as opposed to the 90 or 100 that would typically get written.
Yes, you are correct. But it was definitely stated that dentists.
I know it was, but that you just opened an old wound for me, because no dentist, I mean, I don't want to say no dentist, but very few dentists ever wrote for more than 20 at a time with typically no refills. And I had the simplest little ankle surgery and they gave me 90 and 3 refills, which I ended up dumping down the toilet and never needed the first one.
I have had a couple surgeries and a few babies over my time, and they really wanted to give me opioid prescriptions before I checked out from the hospital. And I was like, I've been here for 3 days, what I think was the worst of the worst. We're 48 hours past. If I've somehow managed to do this on ibuprofen since I've been here, I think I'll be fine when I get home, and they were actually very uncomfortable that I didn't want to take an opioid prescription with me. So, but like you, Jeff, I didn't want to manage it. I didn't want to get rid of it. I didn't want to fill it. I didn't want to go through all that. So anyway, there is an open comment period for that. So if you are interested or want more information, definitely dial in. The AGD is actively looking at this. The ADA is actively looking at this and participating in those comment periods. We have folks who are already scheduled to do so. So if you have an opinion, please don't let it go to waste. Let's get it out there.
Hashtag it wasn't the dentist.
What?
Hashtag it wasn't the dentist.
Hashtag.
Yeah.
And actually, as a quick segue, that's where PBM, photobiomodulation for laser treatment, really comes into play. And there's Mel, I'm going to post his name. He's out of Pennsylvania, but he testified to Congress about the use of lasers in pain management to escape the use of opioids. And I think, from my appreciation in our field, dentists are much more open to trying those types of different modalities to find pain management for patients outside of prescription writing. So, I just think we have to continue to look at those opportunities as well. I'll get off that soapbox. So this was interesting. There was a survey that was conducted through the ADA, through a couple of their different channels. And they found that 53% of dentists have intraoral scanners at this point. Would you have thought it was that high?
No,
I wouldn't have either. Now,
it wasn't. I had the statistics from a few years ago. That's drastically increased.
What was it a few years ago?
21%, and I'm gonna say that was 2018.
But look at the price points.
That's what I was gonna say. These companies that have come on and have offered lower price point options for the average dentist to get multiple units.
Right.
I think that's had to have had an impact.
I think so too. So that was a lot higher. And what I interpreted from that is, here's dental radiography. When digital radiography came on, you sort of see that tipping point where there's the hesitation, bleeding edge piece of it, and the cost is very cumbersome. And then as more companies come online with technology, you kind of see that pendulum shift where now if you walked into an office doing film, it doesn't say their dentistry is any better or worse, but it is a little bit shocking at this point if we're still doing film versus digital radiography, because it's been on the market. The price points have continued to improve.
Yeah, they're spending more money for older technology.
Correct. So for most practitioners, unless you're on the end of your career and you're like, I'm just not going to invest in it because I'm never going to see the value. And I think that's what we're starting to see with intraoral scanning as well. So I thought that was an interesting statistic for our folks to know. This was kind of fascinating. So I don't know how you guys felt about dental school. While I didn't want to pay for more years in dental school, I definitely felt like I could have used more time. I thought there was a lot more education to be offered than what was given. Roseman, which is a private university out in Utah, has just gone down to 3 years. They're consolidating the education.
Did you say Roseman?
It's called Roseman.
Sounds like one of my boys.
It does, but it's in Utah.
Oh, so, then not.
I don't know. So anyway, they just dropped their
education down. Politically incorrect as usual. Okay, sorry.
But they just dropped their school down to 3 years. So their advertising on this is to reduce student debt, and they think that will save their students about $130,000. While I can acknowledge that, I have genuine concern about how you educated dentists in 3 years with the amount of information. So I think that's something to continue to watch. Paul Goodman, you should be dialed in on this and be monitoring these things, because we've all been talking about PGY1s and are we getting our value out of the 4 years? Now we've got universities dropping to 3. Can we still meet the objectives of training highly qualified dentists who then don't have to go out and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on outside education to actually fill in the gap? So that's the second university to do that. So this is a trend. The last thing I'll talk about very quickly. There's been a lot of data that came out this week. I haven't had my COVID talk for today. There was a lot of data coming out about the rapid home test. And I just wanted to bring this up because there was some interesting studies that came out about the prevalence and use of rapid at-home testing, or these rapid antigen tests, being used all over Europe and many parts of Asia. And what they're saying, or what they believe, is that the embracing of those rapid antigen tests, let's just paint a picture. If you're home, you don't feel well, and you're not sure, do I have COVID, do I not have COVID? If you could do a quick swab at home to have some baseline of saying, this small test said I don't have it or I do. But what's happening, at least in the US, they have to go to these testing centers. For the most part, 12 to 24 hours is the fastest turnaround that you can get for any of the rapid tests. The PCRs are closer to 48 to 72 hours. So for that time period, you have a patient who's making an independent determination if they have COVID or not. And then are they isolating? Are they going into quarantine on their own without a diagnosis? And so I think that there's been some uptick in activity. I personally would like to see more acceptance of these rapid at-home tests. They say that their negative detection is 100% accurate. So it's kind of like a pregnancy test. If you're not pregnant, it's not going to ping a negative. It's not going to ping a positive. It's just not, it's frankly just not there. If you get a positive, it could be a false positive, and you can follow up if you're asymptomatic with a PCR or something more detectable.
Which with a condition like that is exactly what you want in a test.
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, let's be a little bit overprotective, but yeah.
That's right. So I will be honest, I've got them now at my office. That you can get them at Walgreens and some of the local pharmacies. I have them in my office. If a staff member comes in with the slight sniffles, we can do a quick test to make a determination on, can they stay at work that day? I don't have to hem and haw. If the test comes back negative, then we just continue to monitor symptoms and make a determination at the end of the day what we're going to do. But I think having that
Dynax is the best.
Yeah,
yes,
that's available.
And there's one other that I used that actually worked great as well, and it did actually pick up a positive, and it was in fact a positive. So, I would like to see that become more like, as an employee, an employer. I really like having them in my office, and if an employee shows up and they're like, no, I'm fine, and you're like, well, you sound like crap. Go to the break room, do a quick test. In 15 minutes, we'll make a determination if you're back on the floor or not. This is a very easy way for us to manage and to say to patients comfortably, we tested this morning. They're safe to be back in the office. They're having allergies or, whatever else.
Can I introduce our guests?
I think it's
Yes.
time for you to do that, Chad.
All right. So anyhow, our guest tonight is very highly acclaimed. He may have
Lots of letters.
Yeah, he's got lots of letters, but he is down with OPP. I checked just to make sure.
Well, good.
And he will have to add the DINK after.
Yeah, he will. So anyways, he may have the coolest job in dentistry. He was a rule breaker in his youth, changed his direction, spent much of his adult life in the world of investigation and enforcement, which is my dream job, my total dream job. He understands criminal thought process to help educate and protect dentists. He's the chief executive officer of Prosperident, the world's largest firm investigating financial crimes committed against dentists. He is a licensed private investigator, which I'm going to talk to him about after the show. Forensic certified public accountant, which is very difficult to do, and a certified fraud examiner. Author of the book Dental Embezzlement, The Art of Theft and Science of Control, and has over 30 articles in dental publications. David Harris, thank you for being here tonight. Oh, I got him muted.
Oh,
sorry. Now there he is. Go ahead.
All right, let's try this again. Chad, great to be with you, and I can't wait to add DINK to my business card.
There you go.
Good.
Because a lot of people have told me already I'm the biggest DINK they know.
That's right. That's right. Where are you out of? You're out of Canada, right?
I live in Halifax, Canada, and since you're about to ask me this, yes, I do play ice hockey.
Okay.
In fact, I missed a game to come here tonight.
So the real question is, do you curl?
Oh, hell no.
Okay. So the other question
wait, no, this is the really important question. Do you love Rush?
Not really.
Oh my God!
No.
So I watched last week.
I sense I just peed on the flag there, but
yeah.
I don't know if you can see all my Rush stuff back there, but anyway.
Okay, I can see it. Yeah. Well.
I watched Come From Away last week.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, I have a newfound respect for Halifax. My wife's grandmother is from Halifax. So anyways, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here. Man, I'm going to let you take it away because I said, hey, let's start with some questions. And you said, no, it just comes naturally. So
no, I was hoping the questions come naturally. I can't just ad lib here, Chad. I mean,
trust me, they will. But my biggest question is what piqued your interest in embezzlement and fraud, or how did you come upon that in the dental setting?
Well, really, not because of any planning. Before I did what I do now, and I've been doing dental fraud investigation for 32 years. So I started in 1989. Before that, I got kicked out of high school. I ended up joining the Army because it sounded a lot better than jail. And I did investigation for a bank for a couple of years, and I got bored and quit. And I was sitting at home, looking at my navel, and the phone rang, and it was a guy I'd been in high school with in my kind of abbreviated visit there, who was now a dentist. And he said, I think my front desk person's stealing, and I really don't have anybody else to call. And he just hit me at the right time. I really had nothing else going on. So I said to him, fine, I'll meet you tonight at your practice after work. And I went over after he closed, and we got to the bottom of it fairly quickly. This was back in the days of the old pegboard system, kind of the antecedent to the computerized practice management software. And my friend asked me to come back the next morning to help him fire the thief because he didn't really want to face that alone. So once again, I obliged. And I walked away thinking that was interesting. My friend promised to buy me dinner. I'm still waiting.
Was his name Chad Duplantis?
Well, Chad did mention he had relatives in my town. So, who knows?
Might have been.
But I just kind of walked away and shrugged my shoulders. And I didn't see a career for myself or anything. Well, 2 weeks later, I had an appointment at my own dental office. And I had my hand on my dentist's front door, and I was about to go in. And I looked through the glass panel in the door, and guess who was sitting at his front desk? The
Oh,
same
no.
woman I helped fire 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, what I said was a little bit less polite than that.
Yeah.
I sprinted to a payphone, because in those days a cell phone was like the size of an X-ray head.
And 85 cents a minute.
Yeah, well, that too. But I mean, I didn't have one. I didn't have one in my pocket. Let's put it that way. And called the practice and used a little bit of deception to get past the gatekeeper and talk to my doctor. And I told him about the bag of tricks at his front desk. And he asked me in this panicked voice, like, what the hell do I do now? And about 2 sentences later, he hired me. So
that's amazing.
That was how I got started. No planning, no, I didn't have a business name or anything. I mean, we, picked Prosperident years after that as the company name. So that's where it started. It's grown a little bit since then. We've got about 25 people now. And about 40% of our investigators used to be dentists. We're kind of
Is
a big
that
like,
right?
yeah. A lot of people, Jeff, who have repetitive motion injuries or something like that. And, they really can't comfortably do clinical dentistry anymore, but they're not quite ready to leave the profession.
So David, I've got I mean, the question that comes to mind is, so did you realize after this next experience, did you find that, well, hey, dentists are pretty smart people when it comes to the science, but maybe we don't always do our homework, or maybe we're not the best educated in how to protect ourselves from a business perspective?
I think before that, I probably had a pretty good sense that you weren't necessarily God's gift to business.
Yeah.
I was being nicer.
Yeah, I know. I think I probably at some level I knew that already, but certainly my first couple of experiences with embezzlement removed all doubt. And yeah, I at that point I had a pretty clear picture of people who were fantastic clinically and really toddlers when it came to running their business. At least that was my experience with the first couple of them. I mean, since then I've seen dentists who are a lot more adept, but the first two I dealt with were definitely a little bit challenged.
So what's I know that there's always a common denominator, but what would you say is your most common, what's the most common sign that people see or that they come to you with? What's your common theme?
That's easy. The office manager's BMW is bigger and newer than the doctor's.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Probably the most common factor is territoriality. So people who are stealing tend to be pretty possessive about their duties, and the office manager, and that's the most likely culprit, although not the only one. They can be run off their feet, and yet they won't delegate. They certainly don't want to cross train. This person might even be the one who gets upset if somebody else sits in their chair or touches their computer. It's kind of at that level. So
would you say that most of the embezzlement cases that you've seen, would you say that they're very elaborate, well thought out by extremely brilliant tacticianers, or are they really just simple things that we could keep an eye on better? I mean, what has been the preponderance of cases for you? Is it like, oh my God, that was brilliant? Or is it like, oh my gosh, if they'd have just watched this?
If you look at 10 cases, Jeff, probably 9 of them are very garden variety, very basic stuff done by very average people.
That's what I would think, but that's why I
asked.
Then
there's the 10th one that kind of makes you go, wow, that's ingenious. These aren't necessarily supermen or superwomen. But at the same time, they have a lot more time to think about this problem than you do.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of the dentists who I call or a lot of dentists who call us rather, you know, they feel guilty. I mean, I was talking to somebody yesterday, and this poor guy, probably 10 times through the conversation, said to me, you know, I've been a bit neglectful. If only I had done A, B, or C. You know, and I said to him, I'm going to take you off the hook here, because any average thief has the ability to size up their doctor, to understand what they look at, and more importantly, what they don't, and then build a crime that navigates around your scrutiny.
Mm-hmm.
And if you change what you look at, the embezzler's adaptation is simply to go in some other corner of your practice. And I'll give you an example. A lot of dentists delegate taking the money to the bank to a staff member. And inevitably, in some percentage of the time when that happens, the amount of money that leaves the practice is greater than the amount that arrives at the bank. And when the dentist finds out that this has happened, what they start doing is this. And at some point, you know, they say to themselves, well, if only I had taken the deposit to the bank, that wouldn't have happened. And in a really narrow sense, they're right. However, if I'm working for you and my first plan to steal involves diverting your bank deposit, and you, let's say, outsmart me by doing it yourself, that doesn't change my need for money.
Mm-hmm.
It just means that I can't get it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, a lot of victims, and Jeff, I'd heard you say before I came on that you had been a victim. You know, a lot of victims go through a lot of blame. And I spend a lot of time with them, sometimes saying, you know what, sure, you made it easier than you had to for people to steal from you. But, you know, looking at the things that the thief took advantage of, you not looking at, likely wouldn't have changed much.
Yeah. But are there any really basic points, like it when you go and you say, look, if you do these couple of things, it's not going to eliminate your risk for embezzlement, but if you just do these couple of things, you can dramatically reduce your risk for being embezzled from, just because you're taking away some of the main sources of embezzlement. Someone's going to have to work maybe a little bit harder to get the job done.
Yeah.
Do you have any of those tips?
Absolutely, I do.
Yeah.
There are two kinds of dentists. There are those who know how much money should be going into the bank today and monitor that. And there's the other 80%. If you are in that other 80%, you are vulnerable to the dumbest, least industrious thief imaginable. Okay, because if you don't know how much money should be going into the bank today, and I work for you, I can simply partition the deposit into your part and my part, and you're not going to know. Okay, that takes no imagination. It takes no creativity. It's the most base level of stealing you can imagine. If you do keep an eye on that, and I'll confess, it's not a totally easy job. You know, one of the challenges is that sometimes there's a timing difference between when your practice management software recognizes money and when it hits your bank. Like, for example, if somebody pays you by credit card.
Yep.
So it's not a completely easy task, but if you do that, now the way that somebody has to steal from you is they have to make your practice management software lie to you about how much money came in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's far from
really
impossible.
I love the way you just broke that down. That you just really simplified something that I think a lot of people need to hear, is that if you take away that easy way of stealing money that's supposed to be going to the bank, then they have to manipulate your practice management software.
Now it gets harder. It leaves a trail. And probably you've eliminated the bottom quartile of thieves just by that one step. The other thing I'll say, which is a little more indirect approach to the problem, but one thing your profession is horrible at is really knowing the people it's about to hire. And JB was talking about narcotics in the news section before I came on. See, I spy on you guys. And at the same time that you hold the keys to narcotics in your practices, relatively few dentists drug test applicants before they hire them. I mean, I can't get a job at Amazon delivering the junk people buy on their website without a drug test. And yet I can probably work in 95% of practices, and that makes no sense. And I'm not saying that drug testing is the antidote to embezzlement. It's
Right.
not. But my point is that you guys tend to hire knowing a lot less about people than you should and could. Here's a really sobering statistic. 70 million Americans, so that's 1 in 4 adults, has a criminal record. And yet also a lot of people are hired in practices without a criminal record check. It's even more basic than that. If I'm interviewing somebody for a job in my practice, what I should say at the interview is, I just need to check a couple of pieces of ID from you. So can I please see a government issued photo ID and a couple of secondary ID? That could be anything. I mean, a credit card, a gym membership, a library card, student card, whatever. But most dentists don't even do that. So one of the mistakes that people make is they investigate the crap out of the wrong person. So, if I have baggage and I'm trying to get a job with you, but I have a brother who's 2 years younger who doesn't, then one of the easiest things I can do is just pretend to be my brother. So the hiring area is one that is typically not well done. And what I hear from a lot of dentists, and one of you may bring it up, is, well, right now there's a shortage of people.
Yep.
And that makes it pointless to do any kind of intensive background checking because we only get one applicant anyway for the position. And I completely disagree with that. If that one applicant rather, has an oxy problem and you hire them, then you're about to have an oxy problem.
That's a great point.
So I have 2 questions. The first is, what's the biggest hesitance that you find in people seeking your services? Are they fearful of having to fire somebody? Are they fearful of having to turn somebody in to prosecution? Or are they worried about their personal life? I mean, do you find a common theme?
Well, let's start with the fact that a lot of dentists paint themselves into a corner.
Yeah.
And
I don't paint, but I'm good with that.
Okay. The corner happens, Chad, when you cheat on your income taxes and your staff see you doing it.
Yeah.
Or you cut some insurance corners. Or, as happens probably a little more than we want to think about, you have an extramarital affair with one of your staff.
Yep.
And I don't know about you, but I've often wondered if infants enjoy infancy nearly as much as adults enjoy adultery.
Yeah.
So you do any of those things, and de facto, you've handed your embezzler a get out of jail free card.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's the hesitation in somebody taking any kind of decisive action.
See, guys, I always told you that the only really good piece of advice my dad ever gave me was, and he didn't say it in these terms, but crap where you have to eat. That was actually a really great piece of advice, was it not? Because I think it fits right into what you're saying.
It absolutely was. And if you break the rules in a way that's visible to your staff, they've got it over you. One of the most bizarre calls I ever got was from a guy who said, I'm an orthodontist and I practice with another orthodontist, and we have this rule between us that when patients pay in cash, we just put it in our pockets and we don't tell the IRS. But the reason I'm calling you, David, is that I think my partner is stealing more than I am. I didn't know what to say next.
Mhm.
Anyway, we ended up doing the investigation. This guy was right. It was the most artistic report we've ever written because we had to dance around this big elephant in the room called tax evasion.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, in that case, it was a partner versus partner kind of activity. But certainly, if one of this guy's staff had been stealing from him, I mean, he would have been impotent.
So that I have a question secondary to what you just said. Do you see more theft? And I think I know the answer to this, but do you tend to see more theft in solo practices or in group practices?
Yeah, that's a good question. And you know, Jeff, you could ask lots of permutations of that question. I mean, do oral surgeons get victimized more than general dentists, or, you know, small town versus urban, or whatever? I mean, statistically, embezzlement is a random walk. In other words, what it relates to is the probability that you hire somebody who, in a certain set of circumstances, decides to become dishonest. And maybe it's financial pressure. You know, their husband lost his job because of, you know, he worked for an airline and there was a COVID furlough. Maybe it's an emotional thing. I mean, it bothers some people that their friends seem to be getting ahead more quickly than they are. There are lots of triggers, but it's all about the probability that somebody under a certain set of stresses will choose to steal. And that has very little to do with you or your practice or where you live or anything else. And it has a lot to do with the thief.
Mm-hmm.
So this really kind of defies profiling in that sense. In terms of the victim, I mean, we have a lot of profile information about the thieves, but no, it has nothing to do with whether you're in a group practice or not. The only thing I'll say is that the bigger the entity, the more likely it's going to happen. So, you know, we do work for solo practices, we do work for group practices, and we also work for some of the biggest DSOs. And I can tell you, if you're a DSO with 300 practices, you know, this is happening to you multiple times a year.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a solo dentist, you have about a 20 to 25% chance of going through your whole career without it happening.
Which is still a pretty
That you know
amazing
of.
statistic.
That you know of,
Yeah.
JB.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the ADA did a study, and they published the results in 2019. And they asked 17,000 dentists, have you been embezzled from? And Jennifer, you're exactly right. You know, this doesn't lend itself to absolutes. 53% said, as far as I know, I have not been.
Mm-hmm.
The other 47%, of course, said yes. And then the ADA went back to them and said, okay, how many times? And about half of that number said once. And the other half was somewhere between 2 and 4 times, and they stopped counting at 4. If you did a little exercise, so the actual breakdown, I'll give it to you quite specifically. So of the 47%, 26%, so 26% of 100 said once, 11% twice, 2% 3 times, and 8% were the 4 or more group. That's, you know, that's what happened out of 100 dentists. And if you just multiply 26% times 1 and 11% times 2 and so on, you get 92 embezzlements per 100 dentists already. And for a bunch of reasons, there's underreporting here. I mean, this is, you know, there's a bigger iceberg behind this tip.
What percentage of the cases that you deal with end up in prosecution?
Where we find embezzlement, and we, you know, there are some cases where we confirm that embezzlement is not happening. When we confirm embezzlement, it's very close to 100%.
Wow.
Around 92%.
That's pretty impressive.
And
Yeah.
I'll confess that we do lean on our clients somewhat to do that.
And I'd imagine you get a lot of clients that are fearful of having to turn somebody in, like,
Mhm.
oh, well, you know, I know that this is going on, but, you know, she's got a hard life, or he does this, or she or he does that, or whatever. So do you find that once you start really laying it out to them and saying, hey, this is what's going on, do you see a change of heart and somebody getting like really pissed off? Because I have a
Yeah,
feeling that I would.
that's really common. And you know, one of the things I love about your profession is that it's really well stocked with altruists.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of you got
That's
into
good
it.
and bad.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for the most part, it's good. And
Yeah.
you know, when I look at you as human beings, that you know that really appeals to me from you. You know, there are a whole lot of incredibly caring dentists who got into the profession not because they thought it would make them a good living, but they simply wanted to help people, and that was the way they chose to express it. And that's wonderful. The other thing that you're really good at is doing what if scenarios, even when it's completely pointless to do so.
I could see that.
So I get a lot of initial calls from people who tell me, you know what, I don't want to press charges against this person. And what I say to them is, you know, that's fine. That will always be your choice, but your decision's a little premature here. And let's find out what happened. Let's see how long it went on, how much money is involved, you know, how you were manipulated. And then on the basis of that information, you can make a much better decision than you could today. And they all say, oh, that's a great idea. Okay, let's defer. And then as you say, Chad, by the time you get to the end, most of them are ready to, first of all, punish the thief. And secondly, to take this person out of circulation. In other words, to protect their peers.
Yeah.
Because I tell them one of the consequences if somebody walks away is what away really means is that they're going to go work for one of your classmates, one of your referral sources, whatever. And, you know, you're consigning some other dentist to be a victim alongside you. And that tends to resonate. I also, if we're talking to a specialist, you know, if I'm talking to an orthodontist, I say, you know, your best way to commit professional suicide is to let this person go work for one of the general dentists who sends you cases. Because when word of that gets around, you're going to have a tough time scraping that one off.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a tightrope, and it's a tough call. I know it's tough for a lot of dentists to make, but I think the point that I wanted to make is tonight is that so many people out there that are fearful of this, and you're not alone. You know.
And the other thing I'll say is we don't judge people.
No.
At least our clients. I mean, thieves, sure, but when somebody calls us and they say, yeah, you know, I've been really neglectful of my, you know, the business side of my practice. I've been focused clinically. I've made a mess. You know, last week I had 2 male dentists on the phone with me in tears. In different conversations, I'll point out this wasn't a group cry fest. But, you know, and our job, as I see it, is to take somebody who's been knocked down, to reach out and help them up and get them back on their feet, partly financially, but also emotionally. And that means we just don't judge you. We're not here to pass judgment on, you know, how you feel about your business skills.
So I feel like I have to ask you this one last question, and then we are getting close to the end. And I'm sorry, it's a demographic question again, but how often are you seeing partner on partner versus employee employer?
Great question.
That is a wonderful question, and I'd love to answer it. A couple of things. First of all, you know, I think at some level, all dentists can understand that staff might want to steal from them. The concept that a brother or sister dentist who shares my education, who shares my code of ethics, who I'm in business with, would steal from me is a lot tougher for a lot of dentists to wrap their minds around.
That's what happened to me, by the way. So I'm
I took that from your question.
Yeah.
And here's what I can tell you in terms of numbers. So at any point in time, we have typically between 80 and 110 active cases. So that's what we're working on today. Typically around 8 to 10 of those are what we call fratricide. And by that, we mean kind of partner versus partner. So, you know, when you consider that it's a relatively small percentage of dentists who practice in group practices, it's a pretty big number.
No, that's a huge number. And, you know, it's just it's kind of a call to action that everybody should really keep their eye out and know that there are people like you out there if they're ever suspicious. So how does someone get in touch with you if they ever feel like something just isn't right? What's the best way to get in touch with you, or what is their first step that they would take?
The first step, Jeff, is always to get expert advice. And embezzlement is one of those cases where in a lot of situations, doing what's instinctive is not the best thing you could do. For example, a lot of dentists,
so a hitman is bad. That's what you're saying.
A hitman is bad.
Okay.
Confronting a staff member when you're not really ready to do it yet is really bad.
Yeah.
Going to the police is bad. There are a lot of things that aren't right. And the most important thing, if you suspect embezzlement, is not to tip off the person you suspect that they are in fact under suspicion, because, you know, if I've been stealing from you and I think I'm about to get caught, and I think the consequence of getting caught is that I'll go to jail, the list of things that I will not do to prevent all that is pretty short.
Yeah.
And we have seen cases, for example, where somebody burned down a practice because they kind of felt the hounds at their heels. And there have been at least 3 cases that I'm aware of where dentists were murdered by their embezzlers.
That's incredible.
So I'm not fooling around here, kids.
No.
If you suspect, the most important thing is secrecy. In terms of how to reach us, you can call our toll-free number, which is 888-398-2327. Again, 888-398-2327. You can always email me, and once you hear my email address, you'll remember it. It's david@dentalembezzlement.com. And the only
we'll put a post up about that as well, because I just think this is such it's such an incredible resource for people to have, just to be able to reach out and say, hey, you know, I need some feedback on this. So David, thank you so much for being with us. Honestly, I could have talked with you for another hour and just, you know, bounced a bunch of stuff off of you, but this has been terrific. Thank you so much for joining us, and good day, eh?
It was a pleasure. And Jeff, if that's an invitation to come back and do it again, I'll accept.
We will absolutely have you back.
Thank you.
For sure.
Done.
David, you have a great night. Thank you so
Good
much.
night.